So this is the Sirui Saturn 35mm anamorphic lens, a lens I've been shooting with for the past few months. And in this video, I just want to walk you through my experience using this lens, some of the characteristics of the lens, some tips and tricks on how to use it better, some pros and cons, all that kind of stuff, and hopefully just help you answer the question, would this lens be the right purchase for you if you're in the market for an anamorphic lens? Now, right off the top, I want to say this video is in no way sponsored. I purchased this lens with my own money from B&H. Sirui has no idea I'm making this video. I just like the lens and wanted to kind of share my experience with it. That being said, Sirui, if you want to send me some lenses, or Blazar, if you want to send me some lenses and kind of compare these to the Sirui, I'd be more than happy to do that. But this video is not sponsored in any way. This is just a lens I picked up on my own volition, decided to use, and wanted to make a video about. All right, so let's talk about the actual build of this lens. This is the Saturn series of the Sirui anamorphic lenses. And the Saturn series is their carbon fiber, super small footprint lenses. This is actually one of the things that attracted me to this lens in the first place, is just how insanely small it actually is. It's super small, super lightweight, super compact, and it really just makes it a fantastic travel lens. I have a couple international projects coming up this year, and one of the things I wanted for those projects was a lens that I could use to capture some architectural shots, some landscape shots, just some basically like place setting B-roll shots. I really wanted a lens that had some different character than the typical lenses I use on my cameras, and so I was drawn to an anamorphic lens, and when I found the Sirui Saturn series, I was like, man, this is like the perfect lens for that, because it's so small, so lightweight. It felt like it was the perfect component to a travel kit. So if that's something you're interested in, that's definitely something worth considering. Now, one of the things to note about anamorphic lenses is that when you see like a 35mm lens advertised, the 35mm is like the vertical equivalent of what that lens is, but because it's an anamorphic, it's actually bringing in a lot more horizontal data. And so I'm actually going to lay up a clip side by side here. The first clip is shot on an A7R5 on a 24 to 70mm lens set at the 35mm marker on that lens. And then the second clip is going to be shot on the Sirui Saturn 35mm. Basically, I filmed these at the same time, and I put two cameras like side by side, so you kind of see the vertical equivalent is basically the same for both of these, but on the anamorphic, you're adding a ton of horizontal data. And the horizontal data is actually equivalent on this lens to a 22mm lens. And so you're kind of getting like a 35mm and a 22mm all together. Now, another thing to talk about too about anamorphic lenses is how anamorphic lenses handle light flares. So on an anamorphic lens, basically you're adding a bunch of horizontal data, and you're kind of compressing that and squeezing that into the image. And then when you get in post, you actually de-squeeze and stretch that footage out, and that's how you get that super elongated frame. Now, because you do this, you're also stretching all the light. And one of the reasons people purchase anamorphic lenses is because you get really, really cool light flares. I'll show a couple examples here just right in the studio, just me holding up my phone and a flashlight. I'm kind of showing you how those flares look. But one of the things to note is that I purchased the neutral version of this lens. Sirui makes two different versions. They make a neutral flare version and a blue flare version. The blue flare version is, think like J.J. Abrams' Star Trek vibes, where every time you have a light leak in the frame, it's going to be blue every single time. The neutral flare version, and I'll show you an example here on the screen. I have a flashlight that I held up that's kind of like a bluish light, and then my iPhone flashlight, which is a little bit warmer, and you'll see both of those flares take on the color characteristics of the light source, which is something I really wanted on this lens. So if you're really wanting all like blue light streaks, if you want to go super sci-fi, get the blue flare version, but I really wanted the neutral flare version just to have it feel a little bit more natural. So this lens is the 35mm with the neutral flare. So let's talk experience using this lens, and honestly, this lens has been really, really fun to use. This lens is a fully manual lens, which means you have to fully manually focus. It has a manual aperture ring as well. And so everything about this lens you have to dial in on your own. And that, combined with the fact that it's an anamorphic lens, and so you're getting all that additional horizontal real estate, it's just a really, really fun lens to use. The footage coming from it feels super vibey, has a lot of character, and shooting on this lens just has a different feel to it, has a different character to it than the normal spherical lenses that you'd be shooting on. And honestly, that's one of the reasons I wanted this lens. I didn't buy this lens just because I wanted cool light flares or I wanted to have additional horizontal real estate. I wanted something that just felt different. I wanted to be able to incorporate a different feel into my films, into my footage, into my projects. And honestly, using this lens is exactly that. Now, there are definitely some quirks to using this lens, and you'll have to kind of get used to those quirks, but using this lens delivers a really, really character-filled, vibey type of footage that's honestly really, really fun to play with.
Now, another thing you'll for sure notice when you're filming with this lens, and this is really the case on any lens that's an anamorphic lens, is that there's a lot of distortion on the edges. So the edges definitely look kind of bowed. Straight lines will not appear totally straight. And again, this is a this is true of like most anamorphic lenses, especially like more budget lenses. But this is also something you can pretty easily correct in post. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to jump into DaVinci Resolve and just kind of show you how I do this. But it's like a two-step process that you can pretty quickly fix this, or you can honestly just kind of lean into it, because anamorphic lenses just have that character trait just kind of by being anamorphic lenses. So using anamorphics is definitely a choice. And so you can kind of go with it, but I will show you how to correct it if you want to do that.
So you can totally determine what you want to do in terms of correcting distortion or not correcting distortion. And I want to show you real quick, again, inside of DaVinci Resolve, which is my editor, how to do this. So once the clip is on the timeline, make sure your inspector window is open, and then select the clip that you want to correct. Scroll down on the inspector on the video tab down to lens correction, and I just click analyze. I don't know if you actually have to click analyze, but I feel like I get better results when I do that. So click analyze, and then just start rolling that distortion slider back and forth to kind of get the results that you want. I find for me on this specific lens, I tend to land in like the negative 0.5 to negative 0.84 range. That's usually when those kind of vertical lines start to warp back and look a little bit more straight. You can obviously do this to your preferences, however you want to do that. But once you get there, you obviously lose a few pixels on the top and bottom, but more or less the footage looks nice and clean, the lines look straight, and you're good to go.
So another thing you might notice when you're using this lens is that I find it's a little bit harder to really precisely dial in focus compared to other lenses that I've used. Now, this might just be because this lens is effectively on the wide side. It's like a 22 millimeter equivalent. And so there's just a huge, like a much larger focus plane kind of across the board. Maybe it's just because like oftentimes on this lens, I find myself stopping down a little bit just to dial in my exposure. Or maybe it's just the nature of this lens being an anamorphic and all that. But I find that my focus plane tends to be a lot larger than what I'm expecting. And so if I'm trying to focus on something, that's like 30 meters away from me, I find that things that are behind that and that are in front of that are in focus. And then even though that's dialed in on focus, when I pull it into post, everything feels a little bit softer than it should. And again, I think this is just kind of a characteristic of anamorphic lenses in general, is that they're just a little bit more vibey, have a little bit more character, aren't like precise focus like what you get out of like a Sony E lens or a Canon RF lens. So don't expect that level of precision from this lens. But again, if you're choosing an anamorphic, you're probably choosing it for that character, for that vibe, and for that, it's a really, really cool lens.
So speaking of focusing, there are a couple of things that when you're shooting with this lens, if you have those things, it just makes using this lens a lot easier. And the first one regarding focusing is just making sure that you have an external monitor that has focus peaking or some sort of like focus monitoring. And honestly, even if you nail focus, I find the footage out of this lens isn't like razor sharp and clean, but honestly, I think that's a characteristic of this lens. It's meant to be vibey, it's meant to have some character, and so you kind of have to lean into that, but nailing focus and getting focus accurate does definitely help in that process. And so having a good external monitor where you can really kind of blow things up and see them well, utilize focus peaking or some sort of focus monitoring is really, really helpful.
So one of the things I've added to this kit that's been incredibly helpful has been the addition of a VND system on the front. The issue I had with this is that if I unscrew this whole contraption, the actual thread on the front of the Sirui lens is a 58 millimeter thread. And I wanted to use my Helix Maglock base plates. And at the time of purchasing this lens, Helix only made down to a 67 millimeter base plate. And so what I ended up doing is I got a 58 millimeter to 67 millimeter step-up ring, and then purchased the 67 millimeter Helix Maglock base plate. And that whole contraption, when kind of added to the front of this lens, allows me to seamlessly pop on and off those VNDs, which is just really, really helpful when I'm using these alongside of my Sony E-mount lenses. Just being able to have that versatility and the ease of swapping just really makes me use this lens a lot more, because I don't have to bring out a specific matte box or a specific like dedicated VND that I only use on the Sirui. For me, this has really allowed a lot of that seamless use kind of between lenses, and would highly, highly recommend that.
So I want to walk you through how to actually de-squeeze your footage inside of DaVinci Resolve. There's a different way to do this in Premiere and Final Cut. I'm a DaVinci Resolve user, so I'll walk you through that really quick. You can do the de-squeeze in two different ways. You can do it while you're actually on the timeline, or you can do it in the media pool, which then affects every clip that gets added to the timeline, which is how I prefer to do it. Then you just do it one time and you're done. But basically go in and select all of the clips that are from the anamorphic lens, all the clips that you want to de-squeeze. So once you have all those clips selected, then right click on those clips and scroll down to clip attributes. Then on the video panel of the clip attributes, you can go down to pixel aspect ratio, check that box, and then scroll up to custom, and then type in 1.6. And the 1.6 is the ratio of this lens. And once you've done that, all the clips in the media pool are automatically de-squeezed. And then when you drag those onto your timeline, everything's good to go. So that is the Sirui Saturn 35mm anamorphic lens. I've genuinely had so much fun shooting on this lens over the past few months, and if you are in the market for an anamorphic lens, I would highly recommend checking out the Sirui Saturn series. It's a really great balance between super vibey, kind of character-filled lenses and like a super clean, clinical kind of lens. I feel like the flares are really well controlled, the distortion's fairly well controlled, or at least fixable in post, but it still gives you a lot of that character and vibe that you're looking for from an anamorphic lens. It's really fun to use. It kind of challenges you creatively, makes you think outside of the typical box that you'd be in shooting with spherical lenses, and it's a really great way to add some diversity and depth to your footage and to your projects. So if you're in the market for an anamorphic lens, I would highly recommend checking out the Sirui Saturn series. All right, that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you aren't already subscribed, please do so. Give the video a like, leave me a comment, and say hi down below. I always appreciate that so much, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers.